Welcome back. All right, so I haven't done this yet this year, and I figured why not? We're about a quarter of the way into the season, so I can talk about who my favorite player is on each team right now. There are some teams where I have a lot of players who could qualify as my favorite, so I had to go through and kind of pick and choose. And then I have some teams where I have a clear favorite on those teams. I may do some honorable mentions. I've got these in a random order, starting with Carolina, ending with the Islanders. Jets fans, don't worry, you're right around the middle. Ducks are still in the first column, so Ducks fans can see who my favorite Duck is. But if you follow this channel over the years, the names may not surprise you in some cases. So we're going to start with Carolina, and this is the first example of how it may not surprise people that Jacob Slavin's my favorite player. Slavin is a defenseman, a player that before the channel came into being and before I was watching every game, I was like, he's defensive defenseman. I don't know. I'd see the hype from Canes fans. I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I see the hype. Well, I get it. When you watch the Canes a lot, Slavin becomes just one of your favorite players right away. And while there are other players in Carolina who would be in the running, and Kokaniemi for me would be in the running, Slavin's my favorite player there. All right, from Nashville, another defenseman, Roman Josi. And with Josi, it was the fact, too, that once I started watching all the hockey, I realized Josi can kind of do a little bit of everything. Very effective defenseman, goes out, does his job, workhorse, plays a ton, really, really respect his game a lot. And so, Josi ends up being my favorite member of the Nashville Predators. Again, not necessarily a huge surprise for people who followed the channel for a while. Montreal, go ahead, say it. You're right. You're absolutely right. It's Nick Suzuki. Nick Suzuki has been my favorite Montreal Canadiens player for years now. And while he's not making you forget about Patrice Bergeron in the way that he plays, there are some aspects of his game, his two-way style, that, as he gets older and as he matures, he, I think, will be seen as, if not already, seen as one of the better two-way forwards in the game. He does still need some work there, but I've been a fan of Suzuki's throughout. There are other members of Montreal I like too. Jack Eye definitely deserves an honorable mention there. For Arizona, this one won't surprise people either. Got to show some consistency, right? And Nick Schmaltz does that. Been a fan of his since he was in Chicago. When they traded him to Arizona, I was like, why are they trading Schmaltz? And at the time, fans of the Hawks were saying that, Schmaltz didn't really fit into the plans there. And I was told I was overrating him at times as well. Well, he's around a point per game right now for Arizona. He's fit in quite well. I've talked in recent months and over the last couple of years about how I respect Arizona's pro scouts, that they're able to go out and find players that fit in, and Schmaltz is one of the earlier examples of that, of the players that are currently on their team. St. Louis. Robert Thomas. It will surprise some people Torrey Krug is not my favorite player for the St. Louis Blues, but it's Robert Thomas. Robert Thomas, very elite passer, also has some good shooting skills, and after a rough start for St. Louis, and he was part of that rough start, he's really kind of turned it around. So while Kyrou has been still having his struggles, Thomas has been fantastic. And so, I've been a fan of Thomas's for a while now. For Buffalo, between two stalls, Jeff Skinner. Jeff Skinner, and not only off the ice, but on the ice, Jeff Skinner's really won me over the last couple of seasons. He's finally bucked that trend where he'd have one really good year and then one mediocre year, back to really good year, back to mediocre. He's been consistently good now for 3 seasons, and I like his work ethic, and I don't look at Buffalo's record and think, well, they need more from Skinner. I don't see Skinner as part of the reason that they're below 500 right now. I think he's had a really strong run so far this year, and they're still a good team in Buffalo, I swear. I thought about wearing Buffalo jersey for this video because I was like, I'm kind of rooting for Buffalo, but Minnesota North Stars. When do I get to wear a North Stars jersey? All right, for Toronto, Mitch Marner. Has to be Mitch Marner, doesn't it? For years now, I've talked about how Marner, I thought, was their MVP at times. Not this year. This year, it's Nylander. Nylander is their best player right now. But Marner's still above a point per game, and I get the feeling that if they keep Nylander and if things don't work out in the playoffs this year, I don't think you move Tavares. Obviously, you're not moving Matthews. And if you're keeping Nylander, it may end up being Marner that's the odd man out if they decide to, lower the amount of cap hit for those top four guys. Or maybe you move Marner in exchange for a high-priced defenseman. But either way, Marner's my favorite Maple Leaf, has been for a long time, and that has not changed. For Detroit, I thought about writing Andrew Kopp. I did. Andrew Kopp is a player I like a lot, two-way forward, who I think's been underrated for a long time. It's odd, though. I would still say he's somewhat underrated, but is he overpaid? Probably a bit, yeah. But anyways, DeBrincat has been fantastic for Detroit. Obviously, the scoring pace he had early in the season was not sustainable, but he can hit 40 goals. He might threaten 50 in Detroit, and he just seems very happy there. So it's nice to see DeBrincat happy. It's nice to see him productive as well after a down year in Ottawa last year. For the Oilers, this one was tough. So I went with Leon Draisaitl, but honorable mentions to Matthias Ekholm, who I've liked for a long time too. Honorable mention to Warren Foegele, who does not take a shift off. Very hard-working player. But I'm going with Draisaitl. In an era where obviously McDavid gets all the attention, rightfully so, Draisaitl's a pretty fantastic forward in his own right. And, I mean, he's just so straightforward and blunt as well in an era where players aren't usually as blunt as Draisaitl can be. So yeah, I do like Draisaitl both on and off the ice. I think he's a good player that the Oilers, and good players underselling it, right? But yeah, fantastic forward. Tampa Bay. So Brandon Hagel, honorable mention to him. Honorable mention as well to Stamkos, but I'm going with Hedman. Victor Hedman has had a nice bounce back year this year offensively from what was kind of a down year by his standards last season. Hedman can do everything out there. I know that all of the playoffs that they've gone through, I think, have taken their toll on some members of the Lightning. Maybe Hedman amongst them too, but yeah, he's just fantastic. One of the best defensemen I've seen in my time covering hockey. I would have him in the same argument as, say, guys like Lidstrom, like Bork, which is a whole other argument to have another time. Brian Leetch as well and all that. So yeah, Hedman for Tampa Bay. For Anaheim, it kind of has to be Vetrano. Every time Vetrano gets a goal, every time he gets an assist, every time he makes a really nice play, I'm like, yeah, go Frankie. I have been a Vetrano fan since Boston first called him up that initial time when he debuted in the NHL. I never understood why Boston didn't find a way to move him up the lineup, and instead he moved on. He ended up in Florida. Had some good times in Florida, languished at times as well, but my fandom of Vetrano's never really gone away. I also really like Minchukov. Really, really highly recommend if anybody, decides to watch an Anaheim game. Watch Minchukov, see what he's doing out there. That's a defenseman that has a ton of potential to be a star defenseman in the NHL for a long time to come. Over to the second column, we get into the Rangers. I went back and forth on Rangers too, but it kind of has to be Igor, doesn't it? Igor Shesterkin, when he's on, I think can be the best goalie in the league. And I think that he's had an injury this year, and I know last year he wasn't on top of his game for portions of the season. But when Igor is dialed in, had to pause for coughing. But anyways, when Igor is dialed in, he's still, I think, one of, if not the best goaltender. You can have the argument. You can throw in Sorokin. You can throw in Saros, who's had a rough start. Right now, Canuck fans would throw in Demko, obviously. Swayman out of Boston looks really good, too, and we'll talk about him later. But yeah, Shesterkin for the Rangers. Been absolutely great. For Colorado, so I was talking about defensemen, all-time great defenseman. Cale Makar is just steamrolling the record books. Most points by a defenseman through the first 250 games of their career. or no, reach 250 points the fastest, right? Anyways, Makar is setting records. He will continue to set records. I think he has 24 points in 16 games right now. Not bad. Quinn Hughes is overshadowing a lot of guys on the blue line right now. I still think by the end of the season, Makar is probably the top scorer. Makar could hit 100 points, and he makes it look easy out there too. So for Makar, yeah, he is my favorite member of the Avs. Calgary, not Tanev and not Markstrom. Nope. And it's not that I don't like Tanev, and it's not that I don't like Markstrom anymore, but Mangiapane, his work ethic, his ability to do a little bit of everything up and down the lineup. Huge fan of Mangiapane's game. He would be welcomed by me on any team that I cheer for. If at some point in time Calgary decided to move players, I would think there'd be a huge marketplace for Mangiapane if they decided to make him available at some point. I have no reason to think that's going to happen because I think Calgary knows what they have with Mangiapane and that his contract is not ridiculously overpriced. So Mangiapane's sticking around. At least I would think so. See, now I've said it, so sorry. For Chicago, I know people are already kind of tired of the whole Bedard thing. Let's move on. It's not how it works. When Connor McDavid joined the NHL, it was McDavid talk all the time. Still is. Austin Matthews joins the NHL, it was Matthews talk all the time. Still is. Bedard's in that category too. Bedard is, I think, for an 18-year-old, ridiculously talented. His shot is so impressive. I don't know that I've seen anything quite like it. Unique player. This is why when number one draft picks are coming in and people are like, well, who does he play like? Each number one pick has their own style. There's something different there. And in Bedard's case, it's special. He's already shown he doesn't really need top-notch line mates to produce. Although he's got good chemistry right now with Kurashev, who's also at a point per game. I feel like I should give Kurashev an honorable mention as well. But yeah, Bedard. And I'm going to say this too, honorable mention to Mrazek. I keep seeing people go, oh, Mrazek's garbage. He has been good for Chicago. I'm not saying that you can necessarily defend all of his stops in his career, all of his seasons. It's going to be a fascinating career when that one's done, Mrazek, and looking at that and where he's played and everything. But yeah, Bedard's my favorite Hawk. Vegas. This shouldn't surprise anybody. Again, if you've been a fan of the channel for a long time, you know that Wild Bill, William Karlsson, is my favorite member of the Vegas Golden Knights. I think he's worth every penny they're spending on him. And right now, he's the number one scorer. So right now, that contract, I think it's $5.9 million a year. It's a bargain for the amount of production they're getting from him. I don't know if that keeps up, but when he's not producing, he's really good in his own zone. He's really sound positionally, and yeah, he's one of those original misfits. So hopefully he sticks around with Vegas and retires there, because why not? William Karlsson's been great. Winnipeg. I've been a fan of Kyle Connors for a long time, and it kind of had to be him. Honorable mention to, Josh Morrissey. Josh Morrissey gets an honorable mention from me. Appleton gets a bit of an honorable mention there too. Or I guess he gets one. You can't just kind of get an honorable mention, can you? Anyways, yeah, honorable mention for Appleton as well. Morgan Barron. There's a lot of players I like in Winnipeg. This is why whenever I read somebody saying, Winnipeg, they're mediocre. I mean, maybe I've got a blind spot there, but I think they've got a really talented roster. And right now, Connor's tied for the league lead in goals. And he makes it look effortless. It's fun to watch him. For Minnesota, after all the twists and turns Marco Rossi's career's taken before he reached the NHL, it's nice to see him producing this year. All the times that he would get his first goal and then it was taken away. It happened, 3 times? He got his first NHL goal and then it was taken away. So Vakanainen and Anaheim has company there. But yeah, since Rossi got that first goal that counted, he's been productive. Minnesota's had a lot of issues early this year. Rossi and Boldy in particular being young forwards. There's going to be mistakes here and there. But yeah, Rossi's my favorite in the Minnesota Wild. I'm really excited to see what he can do going forward. For Philadelphia, the returning Sean Couturier. Couturier, excellent two-way forward who can be in the conversation for the Selke. I don't think he gets there this year. His plus minus is not where, and I know people don't like plus minus, but when it comes to voting for the Selke, it feels like that's taken into consideration, and I don't think his is elite enough for that. But Couturier is very good at every aspect of his game, and he's a hard worker. And hard workers, it's important for somebody to, that you can see that effort every shift. And so, yeah, Couturier gets that vote for me. For New Jersey, Jack Hughes. So it wasn't that long ago that people were talking about Jack Hughes being a bust. And when New Jersey signed him that extension, there were conversations about how stupid that was. It was way too much money. You can't pay him this. He hasn't produced well enough yet. And here's Jack Hughes just putting out a ton of points, and there's a real threat that even though he missed some games this year, he could still end up winning the league's scoring race. Jack Hughes is just ridiculously talented and a ton of fun to watch. So, and again, I kind of rally around a player mentally. Just I understand the amount of pressure on these young players coming in. So when I start seeing all this, he's a bust, the guy's a bum, get rid of him, I counter with, I want to see him do well. So as a for instance with the Rangers, Lafreniere and Kakko, every year I come in with, okay, I hope this is the year. Now Lafreniere's done it, Kakko has not. But in Jack Hughes' case, that explosion was just seemingly overnight. Once he figured it out, quite impressive. For Dallas, there were a few players for Dallas, obviously. There's Pavelski, there's Heiskanen, there's Robertson, there's Hintz. But I'm going with Jake. I'm going with Otter. I do think Ottinger gets overrated at times. I don't know if Ottinger is going to be a top 5 goalie in the league for the rest of his career or anything. But he's a good goaltender. I like Ottinger. And again, he came into the league and then Dallas kind of pushed him down to the minors. He didn't stay in the minors because his play dictated he had to come up. Plus, Hudobin wasn't playing well. So they switched spots. Sorry, another cough as I get rid of this cold virus and all that. It's got to go somewhere else. Ottinger, though, I've really, again, rallied behind him and knew from the beginning that, okay, this is going to be their starter. So, yeah, Otter, big fan. For Washington, I kind of went back and forth, but it's another goalie. Lindgren. What a ridiculous start to the season for Lindgren. Darcy Kemper's numbers through that, first couple of games were good, but his numbers have fallen off. Lindgren's been fantastic. You look at the turnaround for the Capitals right now, a lot of it comes down to Charlie Sideburns. And so, yeah, Lindgren, I'm a huge fan, and I hope he keeps it up. Because, again, for people who've been fans of the channel long enough, when Lindgren was a member of the Montreal Canadiens, I couldn't understand why Montreal wasn't playing him more. I thought that was odd, and I would get the comments of, he's further down on the roster, he's further down on the list of goaltenders, but I thought he was really good, and I thought it was odd that Montreal didn't do whatever they could to keep him around. If you had Lindgren and Montembeault right now as your goaltending tandem in Montreal, I think that'd be great. But again, Allen's been good this year too, but Lindgren just absolutely fantastic. Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh, Bluger's gone. Riikola is gone. So from Pittsburgh, Radim Zohorna. Radim Zohorna, when he gets to play, plays pretty well. And I know there are people who don't like his game, and every time I talk about Zohorna, there are people saying, it's just ridiculous. And I understand he bounced around a bit last year and he cleared waivers and everything, but I like his game. It's kind of like in Tampa Bay with Barré-Boulet. When he plays, he produces. And Rem Pitlick, who of course is, I think he's still a Montreal property, right? But Zohorna with Pittsburgh, I like his game. I respect him. The honorable mention goes to Crosby. Crosby, as he gets older, the older Crosby gets, the more that I'm like, I cannot say anything negative about Crosby's game. He is one of the all-time greats. The question of who gets on the Mount Rushmore of players, which is a whole argument. I may do a video at some point on my Mount Rushmore, but I may just have a mountain where I can have 40 heads on it. I may just cheat and be like, okay, so there's 40 players going on my Mount Rushmore, because I can't keep it under 40. So Horna wouldn't be on it, but Crosby would. So Zahorna's on the list for today, though, because this is my favorite player playing for the Penguins right now. Florida. So, talking about players off to really strong starts, through almost a quarter of the season now, Sam Reinhart. Reinhart, where did this come from? Now, we talk about players that are in contract years, right? And, you got to take it with a grain of salt. Well, yeah, but Reinhart's just playing really, really well. And I do think this is the real Sam Reinhart. I think he can be a point per game plus player. And so, yeah, Reinhart ends up on the board. Honorable mention to Barkov, Matthew Tkachuk as well, and Ekblad, who and I know there's people who are real detractors of Ekblad and can't stand him, but I still think Ekblad's a good defenseman. Don't hate on me for it, but I do. And so Reinhart gets that, but there are a lot of players in Florida that I do like. For Vancouver, it's still Brock. It's still Brock. When I was at the Canucks game, Brock Besser gets on the score sheet. I still do the Brock Besser thing, right? And that's just with my wife. I basically say Brock Besser's name the same as Paul Heyman says Brock Lesnar, and I do the Lesnar pose, and that's all it is. Because I'm excited when he scores goals, and he seems to be excited when he scores goals. And this year he's got 13. I don't think he stays on that pace. But if he has a 30-goal season, that's going to quiet some of the detractors for Brock Besser. And it's just so nice to see him happy. It's been years of all this uncertainty and everything, so I'm just glad he seems to be happy right now. And he's playing really, really well. He's over a point per game. I'm excited to see what the rest of the season is for Besser. So a lot of honorable mentions because the Canucks being my favorite team, virtually everybody but Bluger would obviously get honorable mention as well because I've always liked Bluger. But anyways, Besser gets that spot. From LA, I better put the first initial because there's going to be people who look at that and go, who? Mikey Anderson. So, with an honorable mention to Quentin Byfield for the same reason that I mentioned with Jack Hughes and Alexis Lafreniere, anytime that a player's being labeled a bust, I'm rooting for him. I want to see them prove people wrong. And Byfield this year has done that. Mikey Anderson, one of the best kept secrets in the NHL as far as I'm concerned. Really excellent defenseman all around. I think there's probably a little bit more offensive upside than what we've seen from him thus far. I think Anderson could do pretty much anything you ask of him. I wouldn't put him at center, but I wouldn't rule out if you put him at center, he's not going to be like, you know what, I'll figure it out. I'll get it. All right. Call his brother Joey and say, so this whole playing forward thing, what do I do? And Joey's like, I'm in the AHL, dude. I don't. Our parents always wear your jerseys. It's awkward. But all kidding aside, Mikey Anderson is fantastic. And I've been a fan of him. And again, there's work ethic that definitely makes a difference. When a player's playing through injury, which is why Ryan Lindgren's been one of my favorite Rangers for a long time too. Like these guys who are just as tough as nails, that makes a difference too. And Anderson kind of has a little bit of that in his toolbox as well. From Seattle, Jaden Schwartz. Which shouldn't surprise people. I have a Seattle jersey with Schwartz's name and number on it. Because in their first year, I was like, well, I'll get one with a name and number. Who would my favorite player be in Seattle? Jaden Schwartz. Sounds good. So, yeah, Schwartz, still my favorite member of the team. He's producing fine this year for a team that has had problems with production at points. They're not the 5-on-5 beast they were last season, but Schwartz is still playing really well and putting up some points and goals. So, he's done his part. San Jose was not easy. San Jose was not easy because there's some good young players there that I kind of like, but they're still figuring it out. And I'm like, well, my favorite player on the team. So I'm going with Duclair. I'm going to explain this. Duclair's got speed for days. Duclair has bounced around the league. Duclair, I think Florida would have kept him if not for the salary cap. I don't think he'd be in San Jose if not for cap concerns. But yeah, Duclair has all the speed, and at times he's had the finish as well, where he's been in that 20-goal range. Sorry, just my voice is getting kind of... Anyways, which happens when I get a cold. Eventually it's going to be all gravelly and everything. But anyways, yeah, Duclair, I think the talent is still there, and I'm hoping that for a Sharks team that needs goals, that the puck starts going in on a regular basis for Duclair, as it has now started to do for Hoffman. So we'll see if Duclair is able to get that going for him as well. Boston. I had to go back and forth on Boston. Bergeron had to retire, didn't he? Just throws the whole thing off. Now, I like McAvoy. Marchand is not the player that he was 5 years ago, but I can't say he's my favorite Bruin. Pastrnak is close, but it sort of has to be Swayman. You know, I thought by drinking a little bit of pop there that maybe I wouldn't have to cough, but I still did. Swayman. So Swayman, Ottinger, and obviously in Vancouver there's Demko. It's an exciting time for me that all three teams I root for have a good young goaltender. And Swayman's fantastic. I do think he's going to be the full-time starter for Boston. I wouldn't be surprised if next season he officially takes over. So if everybody wants to trade Ullmark, it's not happening this season that I can tell. It may happen over the offseason, though. It might be a little bit easier to move Ullmark and give Swayman that starting role, and then you sign somebody to back him up. But yeah, I've been a fan of Swayman's, and I've never wavered. One thing that I try to make sure I'm consistent with is if I'm a fan of a player in 2019, I should still be a fan of that player in 2023. Unless something has happened where I'm like, I can't be a fan of that player anymore. But yeah, Swayman, there's nothing that's ever happened to make me say, I can't root for Swayman. I've got a Swayman jersey, right? So there you go. Ottawa. There were some choices for Ottawa, but I'm going with Jake Sanderson. That's right. So when he signs that contract in the offseason, and I see a lot of people saying that's an overpayment, Jake Sanderson's not worth that, I was like, okay, wait a minute. Now, I did not have Jake Sanderson listed amongst what I thought was the best defenseman in the NHL during the summer. And there were some fans who weren't a big fan of that, like Ottawa fans generally, but some others as well, saying you're underrating Jake Sanderson. And absolutely, I could have been underrating Jake Sanderson, and it may have been for the same reason that people got mad when they saw that contract, or laughed when they saw that contract, that the offensive numbers from Sanderson wouldn't seem to support the amount of cap hit that Ottawa's taking on. But he's been excellent this year. He is such just a fantastic all-around defenseman, and I think the sky's the limit with Sanderson. So while Chabot may very well have been the best defenseman in Ottawa before Sanderson's arrival, I'm going to have to revisit all that. I may do another best defenseman, best yada yada, all that again in the offseason this year. I'll just do it while we're going down to Vegas for a week. But Sanderson, because then it posts and I don't see the comments, I don't care. But Sanderson, I think, has already proven a lot of the doubters wrong, but I know for some they're still going to be like, he's still not worth the contract. Stick with it. All right, Columbus. So Columbus is going through some things, but one player that I'm really happy with how consistent he's been is Marchenko. So if you look at the overall numbers, Marchenko does not distinguish himself from the rest of his teammates, but when you're watching the games, the effort's there. You can see his frustration with the losing right now. He's not a happy camper with the losing, and he's a very good all-around player, I think. I'm not saying he's a defensive stalwart or anything. He's not putting up the goals like he did last season. But again, I don't think that's his entire game. And so as he and Voronkov get better chemistry with one another, if Columbus is going to start winning some games and at least being in the conversation for a 500 record. I'm not going to say playoffs because I can't say with a straight face. But, a 500 record, respectable numbers, Marchenko may very well lead the charge. Because Johnny Gaudreau, it just has not worked there. And Laine being a healthy scratch, while everything is kind of up in the air with them, Marchenko's been very good. Which brings us to the Islanders. And, I could have gone with somebody other than Bo Horvat. I could have. I could have gone with Anders Lee. I could have gone with Matthew Barzal. I could have gone with Pulock. I could have gone with Sorokin. But it would have been dishonest. When Bo Horvat left Vancouver and he basically said, I like it here in New York, it's better than Vancouver, I understood what he meant. And I didn't take it personally. There were a lot of Canuck fans that I think did at the time. I would say based on the reaction I saw from the fans when I was at the game against the Islanders, I think a lot of Canuck fans have let it go. There was booing at the start, but by the end of the game when he touched the puck, there wasn't booing every time. I think Bo Horvat was a good leader in Vancouver. I think he can do it with the Islanders as well. He's obviously not scoring goals like he did in Vancouver, but that may be a reflection on Lambert and just the way they're deploying him, too. The way that he was deployed in Vancouver was different. I've talked about that in videos before. But I like Horvat. He's very good on faceoffs. He can get grumpy. Yes, he can be grumpy. I would hope that if you're a team captain for a team that's not in the playoffs and not playing very well, I would hope you're not running around with a smile on your face and talking about how wonderful everything is. So I never really saw that grumpiness as being a negative. It's the same as like with JT Miller. I didn't see his temperament as being negative as long as it wasn't distracting from the rest of the game. So, yeah, Horvat's still my favorite player with the New York Islanders. And I already mentioned the other players that I could have picked, so those will qualify as as honorable mentions. But let me know in the comment section below why I'm wrong. Let me know your favorite players too. Sure, why not? Let me know. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.